Hi everyone! Thank you for joining today's webinar, Recruitment Marketing Demystified, a recruiting leader's guide to navigating next practices. My name is Allison Schaff, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. We have a wonderful presentation planned for you today, but before we get started, just a few announcements. First, if you're interested in learning more about the world of recruitment marketing, all the strategies, tools, and technologies you use to attract, engage, and convert talent, then you absolutely cannot miss our upcoming live stream of SmashFly Transform, the industry's first ever recruitment marketing conference. The live stream is totally free, and you can hop on and off at your convenience from the comfort of your office. We're hosting insightful sessions from talent acquisition leaders at organizations like GE, Intel, Great Clips, PwC, and more. Don't miss this giant dose of inspiration for your 2017 talent strategy and a chance to glimpse the future of recruiting. Register for the free live stream now at transformrecruitmentmarketing.com/live-stream-register. I'll be typing this link into the chat window for your reference. Secondly, there is only one option for accessing the audio component of today's webinar, and that is through your computer speakers or by using headphones. There will be no call-in option. We apologize for the inconvenience. Finally, after the webinar, I will be following up via email with the event recording and slides for you to review at your convenience. And now, I'd like to introduce you to our speakers today. An analyst specializing in talent acquisition, Kyle keeps tabs on key practices in sourcing, recruiting, assessing, hiring, and retention strategies and technologies. Through primary research and deep analysis, he keeps today's business leaders in touch with important conversations and emerging trends in the rapidly changing world of talent. Kyle has spent the last several years offering a fresh take on the role of technology as part of an integrated talent strategy, and focuses on providing actionable insights to keep leading organizations a step ahead. Chris is currently the Director of Marketing at SmashFly Technologies, a leader in recruitment marketing software, where he leads our product marketing efforts from product messaging to thought leadership. He's passionate about helping organizations leverage recruitment marketing best practices to consistently and predictably meet and exceed hiring demands. Chris has been recognized as an industry expert in recruitment marketing, being featured on industry publications like SHRM, Talent Culture, Recruiting Blogs, the Glassdoor blog, and ERE, and speaking at conferences including the Candidate Experience Awards, Talent Blend, and OHUG. Now, without further ado, let's get started. Kyle, why don't you take it away?
Thanks everyone for joining us today. A quick look at our attendees list shows there are a number of friendly faces. Nice to have you guys all here on board for today's presentation. Today we are going to demystify recruitment marketing and provide a guide to navigating next practices for today's talent leaders. First, we're going to open up with providing some context for today's conversation. We're going to discuss the evolution of recruiting, talking about how things like social media and consumer technologies are shaping the candidate expectations, providing new opportunities for recruiting teams to connect with prospects, and then ultimately changing the way we actually do our jobs. From there, we're going to define recruitment marketing. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and for today I want to set the record straight, but then also provide some like a textbook definition for what we're talking about so we can really get everybody on the same page. From there, we're going to investigate three of what I see as the core components of recruitment marketing. You guys, I'm sure, know there are countless different pieces and parts of a recruitment marketing function, but I think that they can be categorized into three specific buckets, and we'll break those down specifically. From there, we'll talk about the role that talent analytics plays in an effective recruitment marketing function and outline some modern measures of success drawn from primary research that we've conducted. And then also we'll have some time for Q&A at the end, and then close it up with some key takeaways. So I'm sure many of you guys are experiencing this every single day. Recruiting is changing, and it's changing really, really quickly. I haven't been in the recruiting space for decades. I haven't even been covering the space for, I don't think, a full 10 years. I picked up recruiting just before the recession. I was actually working at a staffing agency in Boston and have seen the function evolve from pre-recession to post-recession and now maybe another pre-recession period. And these are three things that I've seen. I've seen us moving through three different stages from a measures of success perspective. Leading up to the recession and then of course in and immediately following, the number one priority for most organizations from a talent acquisition perspective was making sure that our process was efficient, that the limited resources that we had available were being deployed effectively, and that our time spend was being was optimized. And that was because resources were tight, and we had to make sure that what we were using, we were actually putting to good use and make sure that it was all efficiently played out. And so measures of success there were echoed this. Recruiting has traditionally been a cost center, and money in needed to demonstrate some sort of talent output. Evolving a little bit beyond the efficiency play, though, I'm seeing a number more organizations that are looking at, all right, so efficiency, yes, it is important, and it always will be because we still have limited budgets, and we want to make sure that we're putting it to good use. But what that means is not just we need to be more efficient hiring organizations, we need to make sure that we're being effective. You see things like this, conversations that are coming up from the effectiveness perspective include the candidate experience. We had invested time and resources into applicant tracking systems to make sure that the online application was available to everyone, and we want to make sure we automated as much of that process as possible. But what we failed to realize is that in making it easier for people to apply for jobs, it also opened up the floodgates to countless applicants that all of them were hoping to get a chance at review and a chance to actually meet with us. And in that, focusing way too much on that automation, that efficiency piece, we lost sight of what effective recruiters actually do, and that's communicate and interact with candidates. So candidate experience is a really great example of that effectiveness conversation. We're seeing a number of organizations that are moving to this piece where efficiency is important, but effectiveness is even more so. And then what we're seeing today is that in a modern talent acquisition function, competitive process, competitive strategies are far more important. This is what rules supreme, making sure that we are constantly able to find the talent we need when we need it, so that we're breaking out of that reactionary recruiting model and into something that's more proactive and forward-thinking and always on. And the reason why we're evolving our scope and function of talent acquisition beyond that efficiency piece and beyond just that effectiveness piece is because the scope of talent acquisition is expanding exponentially. There are new technologies that have entered the enterprise, also at the consumer level, that's changing the way that we interact with each other, the way that we interact with candidates, and the way that candidates interact with us. Social media, for example, has brought in something wholly new to the talent acquisition process, which is transparency. The rise of employer reviews and websites like Glassdoor have really put pressure on talent acquisition leaders to provide feedback for candidates, to fairly represent the jobs that they're recruiting for, to clearly articulate a compelling employee value proposition, but then also to drive a compelling employer brand. Mobile technologies are something we've also struggled to wrap our heads around. Candidates today are always on the go, and always looking for what's coming next. And that makes our jobs especially difficult because we have to stand out. Finding talent is not as difficult as engaging with talent, and mobile is only amplifying that challenge that we've always struggled with. But experience is also coming into prominence, not just from the candidate perspective. I know we've talked a lot about a candidate experience recently, but also from the recruiter perspective and from the hiring manager perspective and from the business perspective. We need to make sure that everyone that's involved in the interview and hiring process is getting the insight and tools that they need to actually drive the process forward. And that's because we're competing for talent at a global level. Oftentimes, whenever we're doing assessments of talent pools and available supply of workforce, we're looking mostly just in our backyard, or we're comparing ourselves just to our direct business competitors. But in reality, we're competing for talent with people all over. The expat community is continuously growing, even just for those of us that are recruiting in the United States. We've got prospective candidates all over the place. And with a growing skills gap in key areas, we're only seeing the pressure on to expand our searches beyond just the traditional channels and try and tap into that global community of potential candidates. And as such, this is all leading up to the growing challenge for recruiters and talent acquisition leaders to actually market the jobs that they have effectively. Going out and finding people is one thing. Sourcing is becoming a really important component of a strategic talent acquisition function, but even more important is scaling things that recruiters do every day, which is pitching people. We need to invest more time and energy into effective strategies, effective and scalable strategies for attracting candidates and engaging with them and bringing them in so that the work isn't all on the recruiter every single day. Instead, we're consistently delivering initiatives and campaigns that are drawing people in and keeping them engaged inside and out of the application interview process. And all of these different pieces are coming together and generating immense amounts of data that we haven't really had to deal with before, but then we also really aren't sure what to do with. I'm seeing a number of organizations are having this conversation about data-driven recruiting, trying to figure out how to analyze all the countless data points that they are gathering every single day in order to generate valuable insights for the organization. And this, in all told, this is putting together quite the conundrum for today's talent leaders, which is why we're going to try and dig into some of this today.
And Kyle, I think when we're looking at this too, I think these are all great points, and these are all changes that I think are happening universally. It's not just shaping recruiting, but it's shaping every part of our business community as well. But what we're seeing also with all these changes is that there's almost a skills gap to a degree, and that we're seeing a lot of organizations, especially on the talent acquisition side, kind of look at how do they bring marketing skills and how do they ultimately have people that are really focused on these kind of marketing aspects on the top half of the funnel within their teams, because right now, I mean, with everything that's happening on the front end, with all the changes and the rapid changes that are happening, full life cycle recruiters in most cases, like it's almost too much to do all of the things that are needed from an attraction standpoint and a recruiting marketing perspective, as well as do everything needed from an assessment to hiring manager relationships and the like. So I think that's a really interesting point with teams as well.
Yeah, I mean, the job's just getting more complicated, right? Which is why we're actually seeing a rapidly growing vendor landscape with new tools and technologies that make this easier to manage. Specifically, I'm seeing modern talent acquisition evolving into 5 distinct categories. And I've done some research around priorities and measures of success across all 5. The 5 that I identified in this research we launched earlier this year, the modern measures of success for talent acquisition, identified talent attraction, which is a lot of what we talk about in recruitment marketing, including employer branding and job advertising. But then also talent discovery, which is some of the traditional recruiting stuff, direct search and sourcing, executive recruiting, paid search, things of that nature, and talent engagement, which is a rapidly evolving category around candidate experience, keeping people engaged throughout the interview and assessment process, but then also making sure that outside of that application interview process, we're engaging with candidates that have interacted with our employer brand but might not be ready to apply for a job. Talent onboarding, of course, is evolving as well. We're seeing people evaluating strategies that go beyond that administrative component. And then talent strategies, we're going to touch on a few of these things today, especially around diversity hiring and strategic hiring initiatives. But then asking people how important each of these categories are in evaluating the performance of their overall talent acquisition, you see how quickly the scope of talent acquisition is evolving. You can see here that 74% of organizations we polled, and the number for this is actually 500 organizations that we surveyed, 74% said that talent engagement was either very or critically important, and talent attraction was also either very or critically important, 71% there. Now, the reason why this is interesting is because over here on the right, you see talent discovery, which again is some of the traditional recruiting stuff, like the going out and finding candidates. This is lower on the totem pole. We know how to do this. We know how to do this well. What we're really struggling with is drawing people in and then keeping them engaged. And so I'm seeing a lot more pressure on talent leaders to figure out that talent engagement and talent attraction piece. And I think that pressure is only going to continue to increase.
I really like these stats, Kyle. And, I think when I look at these, they mean two things to me. First and foremost, I think we're seeing that organizations are putting a lot more interest in how do they actually create demand for themselves as an employer and for their jobs versus how do we manage that demand. And so I think there's a shift there on kind of the attraction side that is really, really interesting, as well as the engagement side. And to your point with the candidate sourcing, I think what we've seen is that with the amount of data that we all have online, I think you can look up Chris Brablc and you'll find everything that I've ever done, mainly because nobody has that name. But what you'll see is that finding information about people is not hard, and finding those people and maybe finding people that have skills is not the difficult part. The difficult part is actually selling them on your organization and getting them actually interested in the organization. And so I know what we've seen is that sourcing efforts, sending LinkedIn emails, we're not getting the response rates we used to because every candidate is inundated with those mails. So how do we actually build demand, build awareness, build interest within the candidate populations we want to do? And I think a lot of what we're going to talk about today is around those concepts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because the challenge isn't just in finding good ways to do this, it's in scaling them too. And, recruitment marketing is only going to continue to, in its prevalence, because it really is the future of talent acquisition. Not only do we have to market and advertise on your open jobs, but we're also trying to advertise and market our culture and our value proposition and our brand so that those people who aren't necessarily looking for a job right now will think of us when they do. And so in this same research that we ran earlier this year, we asked people how important their recruitment marketing campaigns and efforts are when they're evaluating their ability to bring in talent, the sourcing performance. And 73% again said that this is important. So I don't think that anyone would argue that recruitment marketing is coming into prominence, that these are the days of recruitment marketing, but I think that this data really underlines just how much of an investment we're going to be making in recruitment marketing in the coming years. But what exactly are we talking about when we say recruitment marketing? Because it is a bit of a catch-all term. I thought it would be important for us to put some stakes in the ground and say this is exactly what we're talking about. So from my perspective, and again, I'm a researcher in covering this space, my perspective, talent acquisition has, always drawn on elements of marketing and then also sales. There's a lot of similarity between the two. But today, I think recruitment marketing has become more of a formal process. It's something that we're really seeing best practices maturing over time. And today, I think that it's pretty all-encompassing. It covers recruitment marketing covers all of the activities and strategies and initiatives and campaigns that are geared towards building and maintaining employer brand, but then also extending the exposure and increasing the reach of our career opportunities to make sure that people who are looking for jobs that we are hiring for can actually find us. There's so much noise out there, and to the point where many of today's best candidates are actually hiding from recruiters, and so they don't want to be bothered by direct emails from recruiters. Instead, they're really just wanting to research you on their own time at their own pace. And so it's important as well that all of the messaging and advertising for talent acquisition, that we're able to manage these things too, make sure that we're consistently representing our organization, we're consistently representing our brand and value proposition. And that's what all folds into recruitment marketing here.
Yeah, and Kyle, when I think about recruitment marketing, I think through, kind of as a society, we're pushing more and more on the side of beginning relationships later in the process, when we buy goods and services, when we look for careers. Probably 60% of the process happens before you ever reach out to a supplier or ever talk to an organization. And so when I think about that, recruit marketing to me is about how do we build relationships, and how do we build relationships much earlier in the process and manage and nurture those relationships over time. When we think about recruit marketing, the end goal hopefully is that you have built relationships and built pipelines of people so that the next time a job comes in, we have done the work ahead of time, so that we can fill those jobs easier, quicker, cheaper in the process, but creating a real strategy around that so that it becomes easier and easier to do our jobs every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And a really big theme both for recruitment marketing, but then also for today's presentation is that the pressure that talent leaders are under isn't just to figure out recruitment marketing. It's to evolve beyond reactionary recruiting. And that is what recruitment marketing does best. It gets you into a position where you are able to consistently draw in the quality candidates, whether they're direct applicants or whether they're just prospects, and then nurturing them through that pipeline so that you, whenever you're ready to start hiring, whenever you have a job that you need to fill, you can draw on a ready-to-go database rather than starting from scratch. So I said recruitment marketing is a bit of a catch-all, that it is a very broad and all-encompassing term. There are so many different pieces and parts that factor into a recruitment marketing strategy, but I think we can organize them into three different components. The first, as I've described before, is that talent discovery piece. It includes a lot of the traditional pieces of recruitment of recruiting, finding people, pipelining people, sourcing talent. But I think that recruitment marketing takes us a step further and is only continuing to evolve. Talent attraction encompasses some of the more the pieces that we typically think of when we talk about recruitment marketing, promoting an employer brand, advertising open jobs, amplifying employer value proposition, all in order to draw in candidates. This is more of the inbound marketing. You're trying to bring people into the fold and get them to interact with you and consider your career opportunities. But then also what I think is probably like the sealing the deal here is that talent engagement. This is actually converting people to the pipeline, keeping them interested in and also aware of the opportunities that you have. But one thing that I want to underline and continue to do is that when we talk about talent engagement, we're not just talking about keeping people involved and engaged in the interview and application process. This goes way beyond. This is pre-applicant, this is post-applicant, this is talent engagement for anyone who you would consider for something, for a future role. Anyone who's been kicked out of an interview process before has gotten that generic email of thanks for thinking of us, but we're moving in another direction. We'll keep your information on file and reach out to you if we have something else. Talent engagement is actually taking that empty promise and delivering on it, which is pretty critical. But within each of these three components, we actually can break things down even further. And I'm just going to go down one more layer for today, and Chris and I are both going to share some examples of what exactly we're talking about so that he and I aren't just like waxing philosophical and talking in generalities. We're going to give you some specific examples of what this stuff is. So within talent discovery, I see three different distinct pieces: sourcing, prospecting, and pipelining, initiative recruiting, and employee referral management. So in sourcing, prospecting, and pipelining, I think that anyone who's in recruiting now knows that sourcing is evolving very quickly. But specifically, we're not looking at just finding people. We're trying to get them into a pipeline, into the funnel so that we can start moving people through, interacting with them, engaging with them, marketing to them, in the hopes of either getting an application directly from them or maybe even getting a referral. The goal here is to draw in a constant flow of quality candidates, and in a lot of ways, this function powers the rest of that marketing engine.
Yeah, and so Kyle, when we kind of look at sourcing, I think, traditionally it's been, let's go out and find a number of people that fit these certain skills, and many organizations are still doing that and doing that successfully today. But when we think about kind of how do we build talent pipelines, I think the other element of it is how do we make sure that people that come to us, come to our brand, come to all the channels that we have, whether that's our career site, whether that's our job ads, social channels, have a way to kind of self-select and opt in to being in these pipelines and receiving information. And so when we kind of look at examples, a good example I have here is the Cheesecake Factory. And so they use talent network forms on every page of their site as well as in the apply flow. And so while they're doing some sourcing on the side, they're also leveraging this to start building up their pipelines that they can reach out to. And they also are leveraging automation to do this. And so when we think about kind of pipelining, making sure that anybody that comes in with a certain skill set on a form goes to the right pipeline in your back-end system, so then your recruiters can now go into that said pipeline without having to kind of figure out and start to move everybody around. The other aspect is I think there's ways to really nurture well through automation that feels very personalized. And so the Cheesecake Factory has a good example of they actually, for anybody that fills out the form but doesn't complete the apply process, they send a note to them automatically 24 to 48 hours later that says, hey, you finished the application process. What should we do? Or would you like to finish the application process for the job that you dropped off with? That simple email has led to 182 hires out of about 1,000 in a single year. It's a quick touch point. It's one that recruiters didn't have to ultimately send out. It automatically got sent out. But really a simple way to just provide value to candidates that might not have realized they didn't finish the application process or left it for later and then just were prompted to do it. So I thought really, really interesting how you can ultimately pipeline those folks and then ultimately use automation to nurture them as well as make it easier for your recruiters to source from your own database.
Yeah, and I love that example, Chris, because it's so practical, right? I mean, this is 182 hires from just this automated reminder, but I wonder how many different emails went out automatically. I mean, we talked earlier about mobile, and not just mobile technology, but like the mobile mindset. People are always on the go, and I can't tell you how many times I've started an email, for example, and then walked away from it. If I'd gotten a reminder like, hey, you need to email this person, like, oh, shoot, that's right, I need to finish this. And so when we talk about recruitment marketing, yes, a lot of it is very ambitious, but in other ways, there's some really practical things that you could be putting to work right now that can make a tangible impact in your recruitment marketing campaigns, your recruitment marketing efforts. So another element of talent discovery is initiative recruiting. And this is kind of another catch-all term because it represents a number of different types of recruiting initiatives. These are all strategic initiatives. They include university hiring, diversity hiring, veteran hiring, and I'm seeing added headcount that's dedicated to delivering on a lot of these things, managing these specific types of programs. We've seen people specializing in UR for a long time, but I think that more people are wising up to the fact that diversity hiring and veteran hiring are tapping into very rich sources of high-quality candidates that might not fit into a standard workflow or might benefit from a more dedicated campaign. One specific example actually comes out of Canada with Scotiabank. So I'm not sure if you guys follow many workforce trends in other territories, but in Canada, they're actually having a dwindling native workforce. A lot of their like millennial generation is actually moving abroad in order to find better jobs. And so the challenge they're having is, and in this example, just people working at the bank. They're struggling to find the right candidates and enough candidates, frankly, to fill these jobs. And so for Scotiabank, what they ended up doing was rolling out a kind of a new campaign that's engaging with immigrants, people that are moving to Canada to find a better life. A lot of them are actually coming out of Asia Pacific. But they have skills, they have work experience in their native countries, but maybe those skills and maybe that experience doesn't translate directly to, a Scotiabank standard application process. So they went outside of the application process and they just invited people to join this network and ask them a few simple questions so that they can pipeline them. We've already talked about pipelining. Pipeline them and put them into different categories so they could market to them specifically. And not only did they find that people that were were organized more specifically around what their background is and what they're interested in. They were able to engage with them outside of that application process, which made a huge difference for them. These candidates felt like they were being heard, and more importantly, that they had an opportunity to demonstrate that they could do the jobs that Scotiabank was hiring for. They had an immense outcome. I mean, fantastic outcome. Not only were they able to quickly fill jobs that they had been trying to fill for months, but they also got new customers from these people. They made customers out of these people because they were able to demonstrate that they were a different kind of bank. Not only were they giving these immigrant candidates an opportunity to demonstrate expertise and engage with the organization, but they were also showing that they were a different kind of bank, that they cared about their local community. And so this not only did this enhance their employer brand and their reputation as an employer of choice, it also, got them some new business, which is something that is a really tangible impact of recruiting on the business, which is a pretty cool example. Another element, and the third that we have here for talent discovery, is employee referral management. I'm sure you guys all know employee referrals continue to be one of the top sources for high quality hires, but managing employee referral programs, especially in an enterprise organization, I mean, heck, in a small organization, can be a significant undertaking. There can be a lot of administrative work, making sure you're keeping track of which candidate was a referral and who referred that candidate and where they are in the process and when that candidate was last updated. All of that can be mind-boggling, especially if a recruiter is hiring for multiple jobs all at the same time. Managing these programs is pretty difficult. But because they're such a rich source of quality hires, it's important that we are able to do this effectively. Yeah, and I think that's why we're seeing more people in investing in programs and tools around this specific function. Chris, what were you going to say?
Yeah, and so I think when we look here, and Bright House is a good example of this. Bright House Networks is a telecommunications company in Florida, and they ultimately kind of were trying to reevaluate how they do employee referrals. They were doing it out of a spreadsheet. They ultimately kind of started the programs, but from a communication standpoint, a lot of the employees didn't really know about it, didn't know who to go to, didn't have a centralized location. And so when they were thinking about it, they had a few things. First, they wanted to measure it. Sure, they wanted to do that. But they wanted to provide really personalization as well as transparency to their employees, because they have a lot of employees that stay a long time once they get that position, and they want them to feel like when they give a referral that something is being done with it. And so what they did is, first and foremost, they had one location for referrals. So in order to do a referral, you go to their career site where all the other jobs live. And so I think right then and there, it makes it really easy for the employees to remember how they give a referral through the process. The other aspect with it is once they ultimately referred, they provide a tracker that allows them to know where they are in the process, their hiring process. So very simple things, but really, really important to making sure that we're getting repeat referrals, as well as we're allowing people that really easy ways to know and understand and know where to go to give those referrals. And with that, they've actually seen a year-over-year increase in 152%, and it still remains one of the best sources of hire for the organization.
Yeah, and I think that you make another good point here, Chris, which is back to the point you made on the last one. We are not talking about earth-shattering, mind-boggling change here. We're talking about really practical things that that any employer can implement into their process today to make their lives easier. And I think that's one thing that we'll continue to see emerging into prominence as best practices in recruitment marketing evolve and mature, is that a lot of this is just doing what we've always done, but doing it better and doing it with purpose. And I think that we'll continue to see that play out. Another area, and this kind of segues into it, is in talent attraction. I see talent attraction breaks down into three different distinct functions. The first is employer brand creation, amplification, and management. And I mean, to be clear, this function is a huge piece and critical piece of the full recruitment marketing engine. But there's more to talent attraction than just that piece. There's also the job marketing, advertising, and distribution, and then also that social networking and marketing piece too. For employer brand, I'm sure many of you guys have experienced it's a very nuanced and challenging element of a modern TA process. But I think that today best practices here break out into the creation of employer brand, into then the amplification of employer brand, and then managing employer brand. But it's important to note that this is all an ongoing and iterative cycle. You're not done with employer brand after you've had one brainstorm session with your recruiting leaders and your business unit leaders, and you've gotten the sign-on from your CEO. This is something that I've seen organizations revisit quarterly, if not just annually. Again, trying to tie in this practical approach to this, because again, employer brand is a monster of its own. I think it's a good example comes from CDW. CDW recruits for gosh, I don't know, hundreds of different jobs, if not thousands, on an annual basis. And each of these jobs is in a different business unit, in a different location, and as such, the value proposition that they need to get across needs to be differed as well. Needs to be differentiated as well. That's because their candidate persona for each of these jobs varies. And so what they've done is, again, this really practical approach. They figured out what their core narrative is. What is the core elements of their employee value proposition? And then how do they replicate that and adapt that for each of these different personas? Well, not only did they figure out how to differentiate and how to adapt for each persona, but they built specific career sites for each one. So microsites are nothing new, right? We've had microsites for a long time, but what we're seeing now is that it's not just about SEO. We're not just trying to get microsites so we get better organic search traffic for these specific jobs, like computer science jobs or nursing jobs or whatever. It's not just about the SEO piece. It's about communicating something unique to that specific candidate persona. Each like a nurse is going to have much different questions and expectations than an IT help desk candidate, for example. And so it's important for you to make sure that you have the information that specific persona is looking for. And CW does a great job. They've built all these career sites that have information specific to each persona and category, and they've had a really great result. They've had a really great response as a result.
And I think, Kyle, I think the point I think with employer brands as well is that, increasingly the employer is what you're selling to a candidate. Candidates want to work for an employer. They want to work for a team. They don't necessarily just want a job, and they don't care who the employer is. And so when we're selling, and we're selling in recruitment marketing, what we sell is that brand and that perception. The job is a secondary call to action that needs to be filled, but increasingly that's our product that we're selling from a talent acquisition standpoint.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I think that's a great point. And that ties into the marketing, advertising, and distribution of jobs as well. I think that this is probably the most commonly used recruitment marketing tactic. It's where we got started with job postings, for example. I can't tell you how many how many blog articles I've read about how to write the best job posting. But I'm seeing that there's a lot more to job marketing and advertising than just getting a job posting right. Because we're investing so many dollars into this function, it's critically important that we're actually gathering the right data and insights around how these jobs are performing and what kind of correlating hiring outcomes we're having based on each individual source and channel we're distributing these jobs on.
Yeah, and Kyle, I think what we're seeing is that, the job board posting in the past, which was recruit marketing back in the day when there weren't a lot of options, and we don't have all these different sources that we can use. And so when we kind of look at, where it's going, it's not that job boards aren't necessarily useful. They definitely can be, and we've seen, a lot of our customers use job boards very effectively, but it's what does that mix look like, and how can I be really really optimize my budget and my spend for that mix. And so this is a good example. Bright House, again, uses this, and they really focus on cost per applicant and cost per hire on all the different sources that they're using. If a source keeps on going down, they rank it, and then they ultimately start to review it on a monthly basis to really see, hey, what can we do? Where can we take spend? Where can we put spend? How is it performing? And then ultimately, how can we get more quality out of it for less spent? We're also seeing, like, organizations, CH2M is a good example, with metrics of being able to measure all those sources, including their career site, including their social channels, as well as those job marketing channels. We've seen them be able to reallocate $750,000 from traditional job advertising spend to alternative channels like retargeting and put it into career site projects to be able to generate more quality from their spend. And so I think this is an area where I think just optimization, there's a lot of spend that's happening on these channels, but we need to get way better at tracking it and making sure that we're a lot more nimble in making changes and being adaptable when we think around the job marketing strategy.
Absolutely. I think this is probably the one area where it's crystal clear that the scope and function of talent acquisition is evolving just around job marketing, advertising, and distribution. It's just crazy how much of an industry has developed entirely around this one thing. But not to get too stuck into the weeds on just that one topic, because we could have a whole presentation there. The third function of talent attraction is around something that we've been involved in for a number of years, which is social networking and marketing. But what many people are learning, and a lot of times, honestly, through trial and error, is that effective social marketing strategies are doing a lot more than just broadcasting open jobs. I cannot tell you how many recruiters I have unfollowed and blocked because the only thing they share on social media is the jobs they're hiring for. What we're seeing is that the most effective social recruiting strategies aren't actually limited to increased application, or they're not looking at just increased applications and reduced cost per hire. They're looking at other things like engagement. And one of my favorite examples that I've used for this specific category for a while now comes from NPR. NPR, you guys all know what NPR is, National Public Radio. They only share one job posting a day. One job posting each day. That's all they share under their NPR Jobs Twitter account. The rest of the content that they share is industry-relevant news, NPR-specific news, sharing information that people in their network are distributing, calling out things that people are doing at NPR. They're sharing things that are giving people that are outside the organization a better understanding of what it's like to work in the organization, so that then when they have a new job that they're hiring for, they can tweet that out, and they're going to get way more engagement because people are actually visiting NPR Jobs to learn about NPR. What a novel concept, right? But unfortunately, what we continue to see is that a lot of recruiters are still missing the mark here. They still are struggling to get quality content out there, to find and distribute quality content that's both relevant and interesting to their audience. But I think this is really critical in nature, because not only does this affect your ability to pipeline, not only does this affect your employer brand, but there's also just a number of free resources for social marketing that you can be using today to drive your recruitment marketing function. The third and final component of recruitment marketing we're going to dig into is talent engagement, and this can be broken down into three general functions as well. The first is candidate relationship management. I'm sure you guys have heard a lot about it. The second is talent communities, talent networks. They're used a bit synonymously. I think they're probably the same thing. And then candidate experience management. Now, for candidate relationship management, or CRM, some people call it talent relationship management. There's a number of different things that people are using, or like recruiting CRM people talk about. But ultimately, CRM is the practice of managing interactions with candidates. And this isn't just like candidates that are currently in the pipeline. This means present candidates, past candidates, maybe prospective candidates, all in order to nurture leads. And a lot of times, because there's so much work that goes into CRM, they're heavily reliant on having a system in place that automates and customizes communications, but then also, and probably most importantly, tracks and measures the performance of outreach campaigns and make sure that you're able to gain insights into the pipeline health and who's moving through the funnel.
Yeah, and I think when we think about CRM and kind of its place within recruitment marketing, I think we talked about a lot of that sourcing and pipelining and how do we actually generate leads from all the different channels we're doing. So if we're spending money on job marketing or we're spending money on career sites, on spending our time and effort on social, how are we generating leads out of that? And so a good example is CHQM. CHQM has, through all the channels that we mentioned before, sourcing, through those talent network forums on their career site, and likewise have built a database of over 113,000 subscribers. That's even bigger. This is from when I last talked to them. But what's really interesting is once you get into CRM, what do you do with them? How do you keep them engaged? How do you keep them nurtured? Because not everybody's going to apply immediately. And so one of the things that they do is they actually send out a newsletter that goes out on a monthly basis. The newsletters aren't new, but actually they're kind of coming back in vogue, mostly because there's so much information available online, people kind of like it consolidated into a really good newsletter. And so they send us a newsletter, and what's really interesting is a few things. First, their open rates and click-through rates are better than industry average. So when you look at kind of marketing click-through rates, they're actually better because those candidates have opted in, they know what to expect from the newsletter. The other thing that's really interesting is that they get probably about 400 to 500 new applicants per month. What's interesting there is that these were people that didn't apply right away. They might have been in the talent network, might have been receiving this newsletter 1-2 months, maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months. But it's a way to keep a consistent touch point for when those candidates are ready to kind of move on their careers. They might not have had a bad week at work today, but they might have one in a few months. And so this is, a good regular touch point. And so thinking through what content can I send to candidates over time, especially ones that have opted in, is a really good best practice. And I think organizations that have been doing it successfully are really reaping the benefits in terms of filling jobs kind of in the future.
Absolutely. And Chris, I think that we'll only continue to see the CRM evolve and emerge as one of the dominant systems or one of the core systems of a modern talent acquisition function because, it is just so impactful. Your ability to actually interact with candidates on a consistent basis, whether they've applied for a job in the past or they're interested just in general, I think that we'll only continue to see a large investment with this becoming one of those critical components of a technology stack for modern recruiting. One of the other pieces of talent engagement is something that's been around for a while as well, talent communities. I'm kind of on the fence with this one because it's been here before. It's not necessarily new, but most organizations have really not gotten a whole lot out of it. And they just kind of struggle to leverage these effectively. I think the fundamental problem here is that most recruiting teams have just treated talent communities as just another database, as just a specific database where they can pull talent, they can source talent. They failed to deliver on a key component of talent engagement, and please don't laugh at this because it is kind of funny, but it's interaction. Most recruiters just haven't interacted with their talent communities. It's kind of a field of dreams perspective. It's like, if you build it, they will come. And people rolled out talent communities, and people didn't really sign up for it. And that's because nothing was really happening there. But a good example of an effective talent community is is something that is giving candidates an opportunity to do a few different things. To connect with the organization outside of that interview process. Again, maybe you're hearing me repeating this, so that's because it's consistent across a lot of best practice in recruitment marketing. It's getting beyond the application. So talent communities, first of all, give people an opportunity to interact with your organization outside of the application interview process. But then also it gives them an opportunity to network with each other and share ideas and have discussions and demonstrate domain expertise. And these can actually be a really rich resource for recruiters because you're getting a perspective on candidates outside of their resume. I mean, for myself, if you look at my resume, excuse me, you put my qualifications onto a piece of paper, I mean, frankly, it's not all that impressive. But I'd like to think that I'm not a complete waste of space, right? So even if I'm not getting responses from recruiters because my resume is just kind of blasé, it doesn't really jump out at you, but I'm a great candidate, how excited would I be to have an opportunity to demonstrate that in a meaningful way? And so talent communities are really coming back into prominence because now we're starting to understand that the piece that we were always missing is something that we can actually manage. And so you're seeing community managers being added onto talent acquisition teams. You're seeing recruiters that are really good at managing social networks and keeping tabs on different discussion groups in LinkedIn. You're seeing that becoming actually their full-time job. And I'm really encouraged by that because I think that this is really a good opportunity for those employers that are struggling to differentiate themselves from a branding perspective, to differentiate themselves from a recruiting perspective. Like, this is an opportunity for you to really stand out and curate conversation. And this, you know, you can get great content out of this to do some storytelling and build campaigns around these talent communities. Like, look at this fantastic conversation we've had about Pokemon Go. You know, and this is something that you really just can't get if the only form you have on your website is the online application. So I think we'll continue to see this actually rising in relevance in the coming years. And then the third and final piece of talent engagement is, of course, candidate experience management. And I see this as a budding category, to be honest. Right now, mostly the tools that people are using to manage and assess candidate experience are just survey tools. They're surveying candidates in order to get an understanding of how things went and maybe elevate some areas where there's room for improvement. And that's a really great start. But there are other tools that are on the market that are actually capturing other things. So I had mentioned employer reviews earlier. And employer reviews, you know, provide a bit of transparency into what life is like in the organization. But there are tools like Glassdoor. I love this thing, this feature that they have for employers, which is a sentiment analysis. It's a word cloud. That evaluates the pros and cons of your organization. Things that people are consistently talking about, whether it's good or it's bad, so that you don't have to filter through and do your own analysis. I mean, I'm sure many of you obsessively read your reviews. I do too, and for companies that I worked for in the past, it's just kind of interesting to me. But this tool actually gives you something that you can analyze and report on. You can see, okay, well, obviously some things that people are consistently bringing up is that we don't have the growth opportunities that we promise in our job postings, or maybe we are not growing as quickly as we need to, or maybe maybe there's some pains associated with the growth that we have planned, and so we need to double down on that. But then it's also, you know, putting this into context of the candidate. If we're not setting the right expectations up front, well, then candidate experience is not going to be that great because they come in expecting one thing and then getting another, and that's going to reflect poorly on you. Not just, you know, each specific recruiter, but for the organization as a whole. And so we're continuing to see solution providers that are developing new tools and functionality around managing candidate experience, because this really is a critical component of an effective talent acquisition strategy. If you can't establish and maintain a reputation as an employer of choice, well, you're only going to continue to struggle to attract the candidates that you need to fill the jobs that you've got open. So stepping back for a second, obviously there is a lot involved in recruitment marketing. That's why we thought it was important to put some stakes in the ground and talk about things in a general level. I'm looking and noticing we've only got about 7 more minutes to cover the rest of the presentation. So buckle up. I'm going to fast forward through this section. I really just wanted to give you an overview of how the vendor landscape is evolving from the eagle eye perspective. So 3 different components of recruitment marketing all plugged into the recruitment marketing platform, which is a core system of record. I see it as the central hub of recruitment marketing, managing all of these myriad pieces and parts. Within talent discovery, like I said, there are these 3 main functions: sourcing, prospecting, pipelining, initiative recruiting, employee referral management. But you can see here within those, there are also subcategories for each: social networking and profile aggregators, university, diversity, and veteran recruiting. And the same thing can be said for talent acquisition and talent engagement. Within talent attraction, you could probably delve into employer brand tools and get a number of different categories there as well. But I'm still keeping them all grouped together. Job marketing, advertising, and distribution, of course, this is a widely diverse market. There are a lot of tools and solutions available there in job boards, job aggregators, job marketing and advertising specific tools, and then social recruiting tools built specifically for managing social recruiting campaigns. And then again, in talent engagement, we see the same thing. But one thing that's interesting, and I won't go down this rabbit hole, but in CRM, we're seeing a number of different solution types. There's a standalone CRM, there's the ATS with a CRM, but then also we'll see, like, for example, SmashFly is a recruitment marketing platform that has a CRM. And I think we'll continue to see some movement there, and we'll see that play out in the next few years. Talent communities and engagement platforms is a unique category, and I think candidate experience management is unique too. And all of these fold up into that recruitment marketing platform. Sometimes you can see people that are trying to tack on their disparate recruitment marketing tools into the ATS, but we're seeing recruitment marketing platform evolve as a category in and of itself, because recruitment marketing is a huge function. It is a massive undertaking, and so it makes sense to have a system dedicated for managing all of those moving pieces and parts, but then also gathering data across all of the initiatives and efforts and activities that are involved in recruitment marketing. And that's what the recruitment marketing platform does.
And I'd say here too, Kyle, I think it's important when you think about a recruitment marketing platform, it's really focused on the top half of the funnel. It's everything that you do with candidates pre-application. When we look about on the ATS and the hiring process, that is a whole different sense of functionality and a kind of a different purpose. It's more process-driven, it's more compliance-driven, where engagement is really focused on the top half of the funnel. And so those systems need to work together. And in the best examples, they have deep integrations.
Absolutely. And I think that we'll only see continued pressure on integration capabilities, whether you're talking about an ATS or you're talking about a recruitment marketing platform. I think that integration capabilities are going to be that make or break piece, because this ecosystem is just expanding like explosively. But getting beyond that recruitment marketing platform, I wanted to make sure we had some time to talk about how people can do better in recruitment marketing, because it is a critical capability. And I just have some like high level recommendations for people to take home today. The first is, honestly, it all revolves around measurement, making sure that you're not just taking shots in the dark, because that's wasting time and, most importantly, wasting budget. So start by measuring what you can. Understand what you are able to measure from an activities and output perspective, and prioritizing those measures and metrics that align with whatever KPIs you have set in place. But then also, speaking of KPIs, make sure that you are measuring what matters most. What matters most to the recruiting team, what matters most to the hiring managers, what matters most to the business itself. Making sure that you're gathering, getting feedback from the organization around what those are, and then delivering on them is going to make you that data hero you need to be. And then just general best practice for measurement in general is measure frequently, measure consistently, and then make sure that you're actually analyzing and reporting on things so that you can ultimately optimize on these efforts as well. Let's see here. A specific example here, and this again comes from the modern measures of success research that we've done. I asked people to let me know to what extent they're actually measuring just some general metrics for evaluating recruitment marketing performance. And what you can see here is that the majority of people really aren't. So the categories here are brand awareness, social engagement, click-through rates, job posting performance, conversion rates, brand strength, and web traffic origins and activities. And what you can see, the line across the top are those organizations that are not tracking these things at all. And then you might notice two other things is the green and the goldenrod are the most prominent responses of those that are doing anything. The green is mostly anecdotal information that's gathered ad hoc, and which is interesting because how do you get anecdotal information on conversion rates and brand strength? It's just like, hey, how's our brand doing? It's doing okay. Okay, cool. And that's the end of the performance conversation, which it just blows my mind. But then the one area where you see this dip down is in job posting performance. And obviously that's because most of your job boards and job aggregators are sending you automated responses. So you're pulling those automated reports. So you're pulling those whenever your manager is breathing down your neck. There's a lot, all of this white area here is opportunity for you to do better and differentiate, stand apart.
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing here, and just thinking through it, is just that how are you measuring this? Are you measuring it from one place? Are you getting it from a lot of different sources? And how easily is it to get that data together? Because even on the job posting side, if you're getting it from all your job posting vendors, they're all probably measuring it a little bit different in terms of, and they want to give you good metrics. So really interesting is how people go about measuring this stuff, whether it's an ATS with candidate self-selection or, through more recruitment marketing-oriented tools.
Yeah, great point, Chris, and thanks for raising it. And I will note that in the actual Modern Measures of Research report, we do dig into where this data is coming from too and how they're actually gathering and tracking data, not just in recruitment marketing, but in talent acquisition in general. And it's not pretty. And then I'm going to skip through these next three slides because we all know that the talent analytics is valuable. But I did want to highlight this one slide here because this is really, really important. We asked the question of how they're actually reporting on data in talent acquisition and recruitment marketing. And although 91% of survey respondents said they're reporting to C-level executives, it was mind-blowing to see that only 23% of organizations are reporting the performance of talent acquisition efforts to their hiring managers, which means that 77% of hiring managers are left in the dark. They don't know how you're doing, and they can only assume that you're not doing that great, which is not exactly the way to gain respect in the organization. There's a lot of opportunity here to do better just by having more conversations with the people that you actually are, your internal clients.
Thanks, Kyle and Chris, for an insightful presentation today. I hope that all of you in the audience enjoyed our broadcast. I'll be following up with you shortly with the event recording and slides, so if you missed anything or you want to take a closer look at those slides that Kyle had to speed through towards the end, you're welcome to do so at your convenience. Just one last reminder, we'd love to have you at our live stream of the industry's first ever recruitment marketing conference. So you can find the URL for SmashFly Transform live stream in the chat box, or you can be redirected there when you close this window. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today, and please enjoy the rest of your afternoon.